Hey everybody, what's going on? It is James here with Crypto Common Sense. It is April 8th, 2026, and it's been about 5 months since my last video, so a lot has happened since then, and I'm going to attempt to cover some of that as well as some new information today. I was actually sick for a few months, on and off, lost my voice, just now getting it back after about 6 or 8 weeks, so that's been interesting. And so I thought I'd sit down and do this video because like so many videos that I do, they're normally spur of the moment because I see something that's just so idiotic that it makes me just want to scream. And the thing that I've been seeing lately, not just today, but quite a bit lately, is this idiotic idea that Social Security is a scam because if you put the same amount into retirement, you'd have more money. But the thing that all of these goofballs leave out is that Social Security is not a retirement plan. Social Security, as I commented here, because, I've been on Twitter a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit the last week. Social Security is an insurance fund. They always forget the part that if I invest, let's say that I'm 25 years old and I start investing in the stock market, and I invest for 5 years, maybe I've got $20,000 invested, and then I break my back and I'm paralyzed and I can never work again. Well, I'm going to get that $20,000. I could withdraw it and live off of it, or maybe I can let it appreciate if I have some other source of income, which I probably wouldn't if I'm paralyzed or if I'm unable to work. And so basically that's what I'm going to have. And without Social Security, I would end up destitute, homeless, and eventually die of poverty. However, if I've paid into Social Security for a number of years and then I become disabled, guess what happens? They pay me for the rest of my life because it's called Social Security Disability Insurance. Let's say that today at 44 years old, I unfortunately go to sleep tonight and I don't wake up tomorrow. Guess what they're going to do? They're going to give my wife survivor's benefits. And if my daughter was still a minor, they would give her survivor's benefits. When I was 17 years old, my dad passed away and I was left on my own, and the government gave me $900 a month in Social Security survivor's benefits because of all the money my dad had paid into that system. So again, it's insurance. People seem to completely ignore this, and it boggles the mind because it's not honest. To make posts like this is dishonest because you're not comparing apples to apples. You're comparing apples to oranges. Yes, the return in the market would be bigger in most cases than the return of Social Security. But again, even that's not really an honest statement because we don't know what the market's going to do. We can only say this is historically what the market has done. But what happens if you invest your whole life in the market and then right when you reach retirement, a Great Depression kicks off and you lose 85% of your investment? Guess what? That doesn't happen with Social Security. Now, I understand people are going to argue and say, but Social Security is running out of money. Listen, I understand, right? And we could even go deep down that rabbit hole if we wanted to. What I'm saying, though, is it's important that when you see these types of posts, that you really question the people. I don't know this guy. I have no idea who this is. I don't know if this is a government person. I don't know if he's political. I don't know. I don't get involved in that circus, okay? But when you see anything like this, whether it's from a friend, a family member, or some random person on the internet, always question the integrity of the post. This is not an honest post. This is ridiculous. This is meant to stir up his followers. And then you have people like this guy sharing it, right? 200,000 followers. Again, I have no idea who this person is, but he's saying faith, family, freedom, starve the grift. I don't even know what that means. Well, if you really care about family, you probably want to have Social Security benefits so that if something happens to you, your family's taken care of. Now, some people say, well, buy insurance. Fine, right? Fine. But the reality is this, most people don't have life insurance. We see it all the time. The popular thing nowadays is the GoFundMes. And me personally, I've had insurance ever since my daughter was a newborn. When my daughter was born, my wife and I both went out. We bought fairly sizable term life insurance policies with disability riders and the whole 9 yards. And so if something were to happen to us, my daughter will be financially taken care of on top of Social Security. So we're responsible people. And even when we were having problems financially, we always paid those life insurance premiums. In fact, we've had the exact same policies now for almost 20 years. right? But just keep stuff like this in mind, because this type of social media, virtue signaling, if you will, it's the same reason when we go into the markets, it's the same reason that these crypto influencers had convinced people that at $100,000 they should be buying Bitcoin. And most people are not thinking for themselves. They're just following the herd. They're following their favorite influencers. This guy said XYZ, so I'm going to do XYZ. But you've got to remember, most of these people that you're following, they're making a living based off of selling you something, based off of advertising dollars, based off of, promoting a certain coin or a certain sponsorship. And at the end of the day, if you lose everything, including your own, they really don't care. All right. I tried to be different over the last 9 years that I've been doing videos. I've always tried to put my followers first. In fact, I've never once accepted a sponsorship. I have been offered dozens of sponsorship deals, including certain exchanges like Deribit a few years ago tried to offer me a sponsorship. They were going to give me money to trade, plus pay me to promote the platform. I refused. I've just never been okay with that. I feel like there's an integrity issue there. If you're pushing something and sponsoring something, then how can you be honest, right? How can you be honest if you're getting paid for your opinion? So I've avoided that. It's also probably why I didn't fall victim, like so many people, to Bitcoin, right? It's why I didn't fall victim to holding my Bitcoin. I was very clear on this channel. You can go back and watch the videos that I was lighting my bags, and I was essentially almost entirely out of cryptocurrency, and that was back when Bitcoin was up around $115,000, right? And since then, Bitcoin's fallen over 50%. I called that crash. If you look at my YouTube channel, you'll see that there is a video, the last video I did back in November. I said, look, I think the top is probably in. I think we're heading for $37,000. And over the last several months, people have commented and asked me for more videos, and they've sent me private messages and said, what do you think is going on? My opinion of Bitcoin has not changed. I still believe that Bitcoin is headed for $37,000. It doesn't mean it goes straight there. It very rarely ever goes straight there. But I don't really know what to tell people, because what really happens with these videos, and one of the reasons I stopped doing them, is people don't watch for an education. They want confirmation bias. They have an opinion, or they have a hope or a dream or a prayer, and they watch videos looking for somebody to tell them that it's going to come true. And it's just not my style. It's not honest to lead people off of cliffs. When Bitcoin was back here in this flag, I had posted, I don't know that I posted on social media. I know I posted inside of my Discord. But I had posted that I had opened one of my first shorts on Bitcoin in quite some time at around $96,000 on this pump right here. You go to social media at the time, people are saying this was accumulation, it's a flag, it's going to go back up, and blah, 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 And I was saying, no, this most likely redistribution. It's going to most likely be a bear flag, just like it was, back here. I also called this one. Was shooting for a target of 8 to 12,000, 16,000, on the conservative side. And what did it do? It hit 16,000. Where did I buy Bitcoin at? Right there. 16.5, 16.6, something like that. I didn't buy a lot of it, right? But that's where I bought more Bitcoin. Where was this flag pointing to? Let's get rid of all these things and just look at a very simple trend extension. If I put a trend extension on here from the very top of this move, I pull it down. There's my first leg. Here's my pullback. And guess what? 80% level. Where do I normally take profits on my trades at? Normally I take profits at the 80% level. That's why I changed the color to yellow, so that I can see where those levels are at, because that's typically what I see on flags, is they break to at least the 80% level. So it did exactly what technical analysis was saying that it was likely to do. Now it's consolidating again. It's been consolidating now for a couple of months, and people were super excited because it bounced up to $75,000. But here's the thing. No one ever stops to say, why did it bounce? It doesn't mean that you're in a new bull market or that new all-time highs are incoming. It bounced because it was significantly oversold. If you look at the daily RSI on Bitcoin back there, it actually fell all the way down to 15.85. That's insanely oversold. even in a bear market, you're typically going to get a bounce when you get to that type of imbalance in the market. And if we look, there was massive selling on that candlestick, which could be capitulation. It could end up being a bottom, and it could be that in the future people look back and like, look, that was the perfect entry. I can't say that's not happening. I can say my opinion hasn't changed yet based on everything I'm seeing in the broader markets. But that's why there was a bounce there. The other thing that happened was if you look at this on a weekly chart, this actually came right down to that 200-week exponential moving average and hit oversold on the weekly level. And again, historically, that has been a really good place to look for those moves on Bitcoin. And like back here, the bear market low was actually right over here, but we saw it hit, around 18,000, going to oversold on the weekly, then, dig a little lower, put in a bullish divergence, and then it ripped. But the thing is market bottoms typically don't happen in a week or 2 weeks or a month, except in the case of COVID, where the money printers went nuts and created a V bottom. Typically, accumulation is going to play out over several months. Like if you look at this bear market, it went from June through roughly, really we could even make the case through March. So about 9 months of accumulation. Whereas this accumulation just started back in February. So we're only about 2 months into it. So it would be unusual, not impossible, but unusual for this to be our accumulation and then just to go straight back up and start a new bull cycle. Could get some type of move up that's a bear market bounce or a day cap bounce. We could definitely see something like that, no doubt about it, a short squeeze. So all those things are possible. But right now, we don't have the structure to start talking about new bull markets, even though a lot of people on social media are doing just that. But they've been doing that. They always do that. That's their tune because they figured out the algorithm. The algorithm is, scream, Bitcoin's going up and you'll get the followers and people will love you because you're telling them their dreams are going to come true. Right? What you don't want to do is be bearish because then people don't want to hear it because they want to put their fingers in their ears and get la 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 la. I don't hear you. I don't hear you. And they, if they figure if they bury their heads in the sand and pretend that it's not true, that it won't happen. Which whatever. I just remind myself, when that frustrates me, that those are the people that I'm trading against. And let's be honest, they're not exactly difficult opponents in the market because the markets are a zero-sum game. Right? Those are the people that I'm trading against. And maybe that's you, maybe it's not. I hope it's not. But when we look at this, the other thing that happened on this move down was it came down and retested the previous all-time high. Again, typically speaking, those are really good places to look for longs on Bitcoin. So I'm saying this and you're hearing this and you may even be thinking to yourself, well, you're saying these are typically signs. These are signs. These are signs. Why are you still bearish? Well, there's a very simple reason why I'm still bearish. A, we haven't had enough time to really make a determination on whether this is going to be accumulation or redistribution. So that's one reason I'm still bearish. B, when I look at historical factors, typically bear markets last at least 12 months. So again, that's a timing issue, which is strange because some of the biggest, influencers, they love to talk about those 4-year cycles, except when it doesn't fit their narrative. And if we're looking at this, again, we're only about 6 months into this. So even if this is a normal cycle, which I don't think it is, 12 months is roughly the average bear market. That would put us out sometime around October of 2026 before we actually bottomed out. So those are some concerns that I have. And again, if you look at my past videos, I actually laid a lot of this out before it happened. But one of the biggest concerns that I have is actually this chart. Well, it's not going to be this one. It's going to be my Mag 7 versus Bitcoin. And it's this chart. And I did post this chart up in August of 2025. So nearly, 8 months ago? And I did a video. I talked about how I felt like, Bitcoin was undergoing distribution and that the money was actually cycling away from cryptocurrency and into the AI stocks because they presented a bigger opportunity. And I talked about in that video how this peak back here looks recent, but in fact, this peak was actually the December of 2017 high. And that really all Bitcoin has done has moved sideways against AI stocks over the last 9 years. I said 8 years at the time of the video because it was last year. I hypothesized at that time that we were up here and that it was a last point of supply. And since then, of course, Bitcoin rolled over versus these AI stocks known as the Magnificent Seven. This is still the biggest problem that I see facing cryptocurrency. Money is typically not created. It just moves between markets. It's essentially, it chases the gains. Okay. And so what people do, especially bigger institutions, is they're looking for where can I rotate my capital to get the biggest return on that capital. And a lot of people and a lot of institutions decided that they should rotate their capital into AI stocks, AI equities, and AI bets. And that money rotated away from cryptocurrency and it rotated into the Magnificent Seven. If I jump over to a QQQ chart, put it on a regular chart here, and put it on a weekly time frame, what we're actually seeing was this market rolled over, right? It had its pullback back in early 2025, went back down and retested the previous pivot, put it on a monthly chart so it's easy to see, right? Just retested this previous pivot, bounced off of that, and then created a range up here, which looked like distribution to me. I was drawing this up. I viewed this as a signs of weakness back here, and I viewed this as the last point of supply, or what some might call an upthrust after distribution. And then I was looking for the breakdown, and that's exactly what happened. It moved down about 10 or 12%. This bounce right now, full disclosure, I am in bearish options positions on this stock. I'm also in some naked short positions on this stock with some stop losses up above the range itself. So I'm bearish on the QQQ. And what I know historically speaking is that QQQ and Bitcoin are correlated. And so if I'm bearish on QQQ, it means I'm also naturally going to be bearish on Bitcoin itself. All right. So Bitcoin, I think most people at this point will accept that Bitcoin's not a store of value. It is a risk-on asset. I don't think a lot of people are going to argue with that anymore. And so it's not that Bitcoin is terrible. It's just that I think that it's went through a cycle. And I think right now the reality is simple, that what it actually did was it went through one very long, I don't know why this is on the wrong chart. It went through one. Trading has been bugging out a lot on me lately. Not sure what's up with that. It went through one very long market cycle. So whereas most people are viewing this as 4-year cycles, 3 years a bull, 1 year a bear, that's true, but I think those were actually micro cycles. I think in reality what happened was this was the cycle, and this is going back essentially to when it started trading down under a couple of dollars. I think this was one bull cycle that lined up with the long bull cycle in the tech market that started after the 2008 collapse. And I think we've just seen both of them go up, up, up. And I think they're both overdue, in fact, for a true market correction, right? Which some people are going to call a bear market. Some people are going to call it a recession, maybe even potentially a depression if things get bad enough, especially depending on, the global state of things today. But overall, I don't look for Bitcoin to be a lone knight out there, fighting this battle and being super bullish and going super high when the overall stock market is struggling. And as always, there's always the opportunity for the market to surprise me. It surprised me in the past, and I'm sure it'll surprise me again in the future. It could simply be that this was just a sell-off and that it was basically a bear trap and that it's actually going to punch even higher from here. That's absolutely possible. And if it does, then Bitcoin has a chance to kind of ride its coattails and go up. I'm not betting on that. Now, you can if you want to. That's up to you. You can bet against it. You can bet for it. It's none of my business what you do. I'm laying out the reasons why my personal opinion has not changed. I'm still, looking for lower numbers on Bitcoin. And it's important to understand that I don't personally care a whole lot about where Bitcoin goes, whether it goes to $1 million per Bitcoin or whether it goes to zero. Doesn't have a big financial impact on me. I don't have any plans at this point to be heavily involved in Bitcoin. If it does fall real low, would I pick some up? Yeah, probably would, nibble on some Bitcoin, maybe, like 1, 2, 3% of my portfolio potentially. But I'm comfortable financially, and I'm a little bit older than I was when I got involved in cryptocurrency almost a decade ago, or 12 years ago if you count when I first started mining it. Okay, at this point I don't have the same risk appetite that I had then. At this point, I'm more in a slower growth, safer investment, safer path type of mode. And so for me, it's not very appealing. So if it goes low, it's not like I'm rooting for it so I can buy a bunch of it and get uber rich and buy me a yacht. I won't. I don't care. If it goes way, way up, that's fine. I'm not going to be sad that I missed it. I already made quite a bit of money off of cryptocurrency, enough that it allowed me to completely pay off my mortgage and put, multiple six figures away. So, if I don't make even more, hey, I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. I'm going to be grateful for what it did afford me. So I'm very comfortable, right, with Bitcoin. Either way it goes, I'm not emotionally tied to it. And me personally, I think that gives me a bit of an edge because I just don't have the emotional pull that a lot of people have, because a lot of people's futures are tied to the performance of Bitcoin. They do need it to do X, Y, Z, whether they're bearish and they're making huge bets against it, or they're bullish and they're making huge bets for it. Either way, I still see some of the same cliches that I've seen for, the entire time I've been in the space. Things like, one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin, which is silly, right? That's a silly thing to say. Fine, it's one Bitcoin, but one Bitcoin that's worth $1 is a whole different story from one Bitcoin that's worth $100,000. And we all know that in real life. The whole, you don't lose unless you sell. I mean, again, it's silly. I have altcoins that I felt that way about, that I lost tens of thousands of dollars on. And if you, add in the opportunity cost, where you get into hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of dollars that I lost because I took that mindset early on about altcoins. And some people will say, oh yeah, but Bitcoin's not an altcoin. As much as you may not want to believe it, there's really not that big of a difference, right? Bitcoin is just a cryptocurrency. Yes, it's the king of cryptocurrencies, but back when I was a kid, Netscape was the king of internet browsers. Most people today, younger people, don't even know what that is, right? When I was in high school, we used Netscape. That's my opinion, right? And it's just that. It's an opinion. I don't have a crystal ball. And trading, as I tried to explain to people so many times, a lot of people feel like traders have some sort of crystal ball or some sort of edge. And maybe we have an edge to some certain degree, but the thing with trading is it's really not about whether you know what's going to happen. It really comes down to asymmetric risk. Okay. So as an example, I sold some Bitcoin up around $115,000, right? Somewhere in this ballpark here. And let's say that I had a stop loss where I said, you know what, if it takes out this range high, I'll just buy it back. I'll admit that I'm wrong and I'll buy it back. So, that gave me a stop loss and I didn't do this, right? When I sold it, I didn't care if it went up, but let's just say that this was my approach, right? So it gave me a stop loss around $12,000. Well, right now that trade would be about 3.5 to 1. So even if I only had a 50-50 chance of being right, that's fine because I'm making so much more than what I was risking. Or we can take this trade down here. And this trade is a trade that I took, right? Shorting Bitcoin around 96,000. I don't remember the exact number. It was right around 96,000. And on that one, my stop loss was like $1,000. Okay. So it actually got within a couple $100 of my stop loss. So I don't know my exact entry, but it was something like this, very, very close to that. I'm actually still in that. I didn't close it at the 80% level because I'm still bearish. Doesn't mean that, I won't close it if it starts to put instruction look like I'm really wrong. Then yeah, absolutely, I'll think about closing that. But at its peak, I was up 31.5 R, and right now it's up around 22 R. That means that even if I was only right 1 out of 10 times, I would still be making a ton of money. Think about that. Say that I was risking $1 for easy math and I was wrong 9 times, I would have lost $9. But on the 10th time, I would be making $22. That's where the edge comes in with trading. It's not that I know what's going to happen. It's that I understand how to capitalize on the opportunities so that I can make more money when I'm right, and understand that I'm going to be wrong, and I'm going to be wrong a lot. I think my win rate for the last year is hovering around like 67 or 64%. And most of those were one-to-one trades. It's a little bit different from this type of trade here, right? So even with one-to-one, 64%, that means I'm losing at least like a third of the time. You know, on 2-to-1 trades, that number is going to drop. You know, I might be winning 40 or 45% of the time. And on a trade like this, typically on a trade like this, my win rate's not going to change a whole lot from a 2-to-1, right? This is either going to work or it's not. This is really what I consider a 50-50 trade. And so these trades are the trades that you can really make a career out of, because if you really do have a coin flips chance, and when you're right, you make, you know, 20 times what you risk, that's how you build careers with just a few trades. You know, but same thing like back here when I was calling for the move toward 100,000 back in the summer of 2024. It's not that I knew it was going to 100,000. That's what I thought was going to happen, but I understood how to capitalize on it, right? So for example, when this snuck below here and set this bull trap, I understood that, hey, if I want to get long here, I can throw a stop loss down here. And if this is going to 100,000, watch this. That's a 4, almost 5-to-1. And so if I think this is a 50-50 chance, again, that gives me a massive edge. But it's not because I know what the market's going to do. It's because I know how to take advantage of it. Okay? And the reason I'm telling you that is because you have to get away from this belief that if somebody's a good trader, they know what's going to happen. Because nobody knows what's going to happen, right? We're all making predictions based off of history. And history rhymes, but it doesn't always repeat. And this market cycle specifically has been very, very different from past market cycles. And even though it made an all-time high versus the US dollar, the cycle itself did something that was very different when you look at the market cycle chart versus the tech market. It really didn't ever finish its cycle. In fact, last year when this stage was going on, I want to say it was in the summertime, somewhere around there, I said I thought the Bitcoin would fall to 35,000, but I also said that I still thought it had more upside and it may reach as high as 175, even 200,000. I think I said in that video that I had sell orders sitting around 173,000. It didn't happen, right? It could not break out of this channel. It just barely took out the all-time high set back in 2021 and then just completely rolled over. And so it got the optimism and then it was just like, you know, and then just fainted. We never got a blow off top, and that was unusual. So when people say this time is different, well, it is different. Look at this. This was the 2017 bubble, right? Straight up, straight down. 2021, straight up, straight down. These were all very clear. 2013 bubble, straight up, straight down. They always had these parabolic summer 2013 bubble, straight up, straight down. They always look like this. Every single bubble looked like this versus the tech market until this time. And again, I think that's because what happened was we actually went through distribution back here as the money rotated away from cryptocurrency and AI stocks. So this time is different. We don't know what's going to happen. So I'll wrap up there. As always, please remember, I am still just some guy. I'm still sitting in a spare bedroom. And you should always go out and do your own due diligence and seek out professional financial advice from a licensed financial advisor before making any type of investment in cryptocurrency, the stock market, precious metals, Forex, or any other tradable asset. Most importantly, always remember to trade safe. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up, drop me a comment, and I suppose I'll see you in another 3 to 6 months when I decide to sit down and do my next video.